Veteran pilot dared a janitor to fly as a joke, but what she did left the airport speechless. Commander Richard Thompson was having one of those days when his arrogance spoke louder than his common sense. At 58 years old, with 4 decades of experience flying military aircraft, he considered himself the king of that hangar at Andrews Air Force Base in Virginia. That's when he saw the janitor wiping the floor near the fighter jet that had just landed and couldn't resist making a cruel joke. "Hey, sweetheart," he shouted loud enough for the other pilots and mechanics to hear. "How about you take a little spin in this F-16? I bet you don't even know the difference between a joystick and that mop of yours." Laughter echoed through the hangar. Rebecca Johnson, 29 years old, stopped what she was doing. Her fingers tightened around the mop handle as something deep stirred inside her chest. An old pain, buried for years, began to awaken. "Are you serious, sir?" she asked without turning to face him. "Of course I am," Richard kept laughing. "I bet you don't even know what that red button in the cockpit is for." Rebecca finally turned around. Her brown eyes met his with an intensity that made him stop laughing for a few seconds. There was something there he couldn't decipher, a strange familiarity that unsettled him. "All right then," she said, dropping the cleaning equipment. "I accept the challenge." The hangar fell silent. No one expected that response. Richard laughed nervously, thinking she was bluffing. "Accept what? You can't be serious." "I am, but I have one condition." "What?" "After I prove I can fly, you'll have to listen to my story." Richard looked around. All the mechanics and other pilots were watching now. He couldn't back down without losing the prestige he valued so much. "Fine, sweetheart. But when you can't even start the engine, you'll have to apologize for wasting our time." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Rebecca walked toward the F-16 Fighting Falcon with steps that started unsteady but grew firmer as she approached the aircraft. Her hands trembled, not from nerves, but from a deep emotion she had buried long ago. "First thing," she said, stopping in front of the jet, "this is an F-16 Fighting Falcon, second generation, F-110 engine, max speed Mach 1.6, range of 930 miles. Richard stopped laughing. How did she know this? "Maximum takeoff weight 21,800 pounds, wingspan 32 feet, Rebecca continued, walking around the aircraft as if performing a technical inspection. The mechanics exchanged glances. This janitor knew specifications that many rookie pilots didn't even have memorized. "Fuel JP8, main tire pressure 120 psi, auxiliary tire pressure 85 psi, she went on, touching different parts of the plane with eerie familiarity. Sergeant Miller, one of the most experienced mechanics on base, whispered to his colleague, "How does she know all this?" Rebecca heard him and looked his way. "Because my father taught me, Sergeant. Michael Robert Johnson, instructor at this base from 1985 to 2003. Richard's blood ran cold. That name was familiar. Very familiar. "Johnson," he muttered. "Michael Johnson. Big Mike." "That's right," Rebecca answered, tears now in her eyes. "My father." The hangar fell completely silent. Michael Johnson had been a legend at that base, one of the best instructors who had ever served there, respected by everyone who had the honor of flying with him. But he, Richard stammered. "He left 6 years ago, I know," Rebecca finished, "in an accident during a training flight. And I know you were here that day, Commander. I know you were one of the pilots under his instruction." The memories hit like a punch to the gut. Richard remembered that terrible day perfectly, the day that changed everything. Rebecca began climbing into the aircraft with precise movements, as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Her feet automatically found the right footholds, her hands knew exactly where to grip. "I was the youngest certified pilot in the United States," she said, already settled in the cockpit. "I got my license at 18. My father was proud. Said we'd fly together as soon as I finished the advanced course." Her hands moved over the controls with a familiarity that left everyone stunned. She knew where every switch, every button, every indicator was. "But that never happened," she continued, her voice now heavy with pain. Because 3 days before our flight together, he had to replace a pilot in an emergency training session. Richard felt his legs weaken. He remembered that day like it was yesterday. He'd asked not to fly because he had a doctor's appointment. Michael Johnson, always helpful, volunteered to take the flight in his place. "Do you remember that day, Commander?" Rebecca asked, looking straight at him. "March 16th, 2003, Thursday. You had a doctor's appointment. How do you know that?" "Because I was at the inquiry. I read every report. I wanted to understand what happened to my father." Rebecca began the pre-flight checklist as if she did it every day. Her memory was perfect, every procedure executed in the correct order. Electrical system checked, hydraulic system checked, fuel pressure normal. Lieutenant Wilson, who had been watching from a distance, approached Richard. "Commander, she really knows what she's doing. Shouldn't we stop this?" "No," Richard replied, still in shock. "Let her continue." Rebecca kept going through the procedures, but now she was also telling her story. "After my father left, I couldn't fly anymore. I tried a few times, but every time I got into an aircraft, I heard his voice teaching me, correcting me, and I fell apart." She activated the communication systems. Her professional voice echoed over the radio. "Tower, this is Tango 715, requesting engine start clearance." The control tower was confused. No flights were scheduled at that time, but the voice was professional, the codes correct. "Tango 715, this is Tower. Identify the pilot in command." "Rebecca Johnson, commercial and military pilot license valid until December 2025. The controller quickly checked the system. To his surprise, the credentials were all in order. "How did she keep her license valid?" Lieutenant Wilson asked. "Because," Rebecca said, hearing the question over the radio, "I never completely gave up. I renewed the licenses, took the medical exams, studied the updates, hoping one day I could fly again." "Then why were you working as a janitor?" Sergeant Miller asked. "Because I needed to be near the aircraft. I couldn't fly, but I couldn't stay away either. Working here was the only way to stay connected to what my father loved." Rebecca started the engines. The familiar roar filled the hangar. Several base personnel began gathering, drawn by the noise and the unusual activity. "Tower, Tango 715 ready for taxi." "Tango 715, clear to taxi to runway 28, wind 270 at 10 knots. Richard finally snapped out of it. "Rebecca, wait, you don't have to do this." "I do need to, Commander," she replied over the radio. "I need to make this flight. For me and for my father." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The aircraft began moving slowly along the taxiway. Rebecca controlled the plane with precision, as if she had never stopped flying. Every turn was smooth, every speed adjustment perfect. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Wilson. "She flies better than most pilots I know." Richard rushed to the control tower. He needed to monitor that flight closely. When he got there, he found the controllers stunned. "Who is that woman?" asked Controller Davis. "She flies like she was born in a cockpit." "She's Michael Johnson's daughter," Richard answered, still catching his breath. "Instructor Johnson." Davis's eyes widened. "Now it makes sense. The technique is identical." On the runway, Rebecca positioned the aircraft for takeoff. Her breathing was quick, but her hands remained steady on the controls. "Tower Tango 715 requesting clearance for takeoff." "Tango 715 cleared for takeoff. Runway 28. Wind 270 degrees, 12 knots. Cleared for takeoff. Tango 715. Rebecca gently pushed the throttles. The F-16 responded immediately, gaining speed down the runway. When it reached rotation speed, she pulled back smoothly on the stick. The aircraft lifted off with an elegance that left everyone holding their breath. The takeoff was flawless, textbook perfect. "Magnificent," murmured Davis. "Simply magnificent." In the air, Rebecca felt a freedom she hadn't experienced in years. The F-16 responded to her commands like an extension of her own body. It was as if she had never stopped flying. "Tower Tango 715 climbing to flight level 100. Tango 715 cleared flight level 100. As she climbed, Rebecca spoke over the radio, her voice now more emotional. "Commander Richard, can you hear me?" "I'm here, Rebecca. My father always said flying was about finding freedom, but for me, for so long, it was a prison of guilt, of pain, of longing. Rebecca, I blamed myself for not insisting on flying with him that day. If I had, maybe he wouldn't have taken that training flight, maybe—" Richard closed his eyes. The guilt he had carried for years was about to be revealed. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something." "What?" "That flight, the one where your father— that was supposed to be my flight." The silence on the radio frequency was deafening. Rebecca processed the information while keeping the plane steady. "What do you mean?" "I was scheduled for that training. But at the last minute I asked to reschedule because of a doctor's appointment. Your father offered to take the flight in my place." Tears began streaming down Rebecca's face. "You're saying that—" "I'm saying if I hadn't cancelled, your father would still be alive today. It's my fault, Rebecca. I killed your father." "No," she shouted over the radio. "Don't say that. It's the truth. I've lived with this guilt for 6 years. That's why I became so arrogant, so hard to deal with. It was my way of protecting myself from the pain." Rebecca made a gentle turn and began circling above the base. Below, hundreds of people had stopped to watch. The news had spread quickly. The janitor was actually an exceptional pilot. "Commander, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever talked to anyone about this guilt?" "Never. You're the first person I've told." "Then we're both carrying guilt that doesn't belong to us." "What do you mean?" "Because I blame myself every day too. I blame myself for not insisting on flying with him. I blame myself for fighting with him the week before because he was working too much. I blame myself for not telling him I loved him the last time we spoke." Richard felt a lump in his throat. "But you're right about one thing," Rebecca continued. "My father always said flying was freedom. And now, up here, I finally understand what he meant." "What do you mean?" "That freedom isn't being free from pain, Commander. It's being free to feel the pain, accept it, and keep living anyway." Rebecca executed some basic maneuvers. Every movement was precise, controlled, professional. It was clear she had inherited not just her father's technical knowledge, but also his passion for aviation. Tower Tango 715 requesting clearance for maneuvers in the training area. Tango 715 cleared for Delta area maneuvers. Maintain visual contact with the airfield. Cleared for Delta area, maintaining visual contact. Rebecca flew to the designated area and began performing more complex maneuvers, rolls, loops, imaginary formation flights, each executed flawlessly. In the tower, everyone watched in awe. "She flies just like her father," Davis remarked. "Same technique, same smoothness on the controls." "Commander," Lieutenant Wilson radioed, "Colonel Stevens wants to speak with you." Richard picked up another radio. "Commander Thompson, this is Colonel Stevens. What's going on down there?" "Colonel, it's a long story, but I can assure you everything's under control." "Who's the pilot?" "The registration numbers indicate it should be you flying." "It's Instructor Johnson's daughter, Colonel. Rebecca Johnson." There was a pause. "Michael's daughter? Wow. I heard she was an exceptional pilot, but stopped flying after the accident." "That's right, Colonel. She's back." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. After 40 minutes in the air, Rebecca requested landing clearance. Tower Tango 715, requesting clearance for approach and landing. Tango 715, cleared for approach runway 28, wind 280 at 8 knots. The approach was textbook perfect. Rebecca aligned the aircraft with the runway with millimeter precision, controlled the speed smoothly, and touched down with such gentleness it seemed the plane was landing on cotton. When the aircraft came to a complete stop, hundreds of people were waiting in the hangar. Base personnel, other pilots, mechanics, support staff, all eager to see the janitor who had turned out to be an exceptional pilot. Rebecca shut down the engines and stayed in the cockpit for a few minutes, just absorbing what had just happened. She had flown. For the first time in 6 years, she had flown. When she finally stepped out of the aircraft, she was met with enthusiastic applause. Tears streamed down her face, but now they were tears of relief, of liberation. Richard was the first to approach. His eyes were also wet. "Rebecca, I don't have the words." "You don't need them, Commander, thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For giving me the chance to fly again, even if it was by accident." "Rebecca, about what I said up there." "Commander, can I interrupt?" "Of course. My father always said that in aviation, guilt is a luxury we can't afford, because when we're in the air, we need to be 100% focused on the present, not the past." He was right. "So let's make a deal. I'll stop blaming myself for not flying with him, and you'll stop blaming yourself for not taking that flight." Richard extended his hand. "Deal." They shook hands, but Rebecca pulled him into a hug. It was a moment of healing for both of them, witnessed by the entire base. Colonel Stevens, who had come down to assess the situation, approached them. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm Colonel Stevens, commander of this base." "Pleasure to meet you, Colonel. I had the honor of knowing your father. He was one of the finest instructors to ever serve here." "Thank you, Colonel. And from what I just witnessed, talent runs in the family. You flew with exceptional skill." "I appreciate the compliment, but it was just a nostalgic flight." "Well, I'd like to make a proposal. How about we discuss you returning to your career as a pilot?" Rebecca shook her head. "Thank you, Colonel, but I think my time as a pilot has passed." "Why?" "Because I realized something important today. I don't need to fly to keep my father alive in my memory. He's right here," she said, touching her chest, "no matter where I am." The Colonel looked thoughtful. "I understand, but what if I told you there are other ways to contribute to aviation without necessarily flying?" "How so?" "Well, we always need ground instructors, maintenance specialists, flight safety coordinators." Rebecca glanced around. She saw the mechanics who had paused their work to watch her flight, the cleaning staff greeting her with pride, the younger pilots looking at her with admiration. "Actually, Colonel, I have a different idea." "I'm listening." "What if we created a program here at the base to better integrate all personnel, not just pilots, but mechanics, support staff, cleaning crews, everyone who keeps this base running?" Richard grew intrigued. "How would that work?" "Well, today you saw that someone you only saw as a janitor had deep technical knowledge. How many other people here have skills and insights you'd never expect?" Sergeant Miller stepped forward. "Can I give an example? I've been a mechanic for 20 years, but I'm also a trained engineer. I've just never had the chance to apply that knowledge here." "Exactly," Rebecca said. "What if we held workshops where everyone could share knowledge, where pilots could teach flight theory to those interested, and mechanics could teach maintenance so pilots better understand their aircraft?" Lieutenant Wilson brightened. "That would be amazing. I've always wanted to understand the mechanical side better." Colonel Stevens considered it. "It's an interesting idea. Who would coordinate this program?" "Well," Rebecca said, looking at Richard, "I was thinking it could be a partnership. Someone with practical experience and someone with technical expertise." "Are you suggesting?" "That Commander Richard and I work together. He has flight experience and the pilot's respect. I have technical knowledge and apparently a fresh perspective on breaking barriers." Richard was surprised. You'd work with me? If you're willing to set aside the arrogance and treat me as an equal, yes." "Rebecca, after today I've learned more about humility than in my entire career. It would be an honor to work with you." The Colonel smiled. "Very well. I'll authorize a pilot project. You have 3 months to develop and implement this integration program." "Thank you, Colonel," Rebecca said, beaming. "But on one condition," he added. "What?" "That you keep your flight license current. We never know when we'll need a good pilot." Rebecca looked at the aircraft she had just flown, then at the people around her, people who had looked past the janitor's uniform and seen the pilot she had always been. "I accept the condition, Colonel." In the days that followed, Rebecca's story spread across the base and beyond. Local papers covered the tale of the janitor who turned out to be an exceptional pilot. But Rebecca wasn't interested in fame. She was focused on something bigger. Alongside Richard, She began developing the integration program. They interviewed employees from all departments, uncovering incredible stories of people whose talents were being underutilized. They found a janitor who was a former flight controller, a cook with a background in meteorology, and a security guard who was a retired civilian pilot. Each person had a story, unique knowledge that could contribute to the base's operations. The first workshop took place 2 weeks after Rebecca's flight. The theme was flight safety, everyone's responsibility. Richard presented real cases where problems could have been avoided with better communication between different departments. Rebecca complemented with the technical side, explaining how every role on the base contributed to operational safety, from proper runway cleaning to preventive equipment maintenance. The response was extraordinary. Over 100 employees attended, including senior officers who usually didn't participate in interdisciplinary activities. In the following weeks, more workshops were held. Basic meteorology for everyone, simplified flight mechanics, history of U.S. aviation. Each session strengthened bonds among different employee groups, but the real test of the program came unexpectedly. It was a Tuesday morning when the alarm sounded at the base. An aircraft with technical issues needed to make an emergency landing. The pilot had reported hydraulic system failure and control difficulties. Rebecca was in the hangar when she heard the alert. Instinctively, she ran to the control tower where everyone was mobilized for the emergency. "What's the situation?" she asked. "Captain Harris is coming in with hydraulic issues," replied Controller Davis. "He has fuel for about 20 more minutes." Rebecca listened to the radio communications. The pilot was clearly nervous, reporting increasing difficulties controlling the aircraft. "Can I suggest something?" she said. "Of course, Rebecca. How about calling Henry from maintenance? He worked 15 years with hydraulic systems before coming here. Maybe he has some ideas for emergency procedures specific to this type of failure." Davis hesitated for a moment, but then called Henry over the radio. Within minutes, the experienced mechanic was in the tower. "Henry, can you listen to the situation and give your technical opinion?" Henry listened carefully to the pilot's descriptions. "From what he's describing, it seems the failure is only in the main system. The backup should still be working. If he reduces speed and uses smoother control movements, he should maintain control." "Are you sure? I've dealt with this type of failure many times. The key is not to panic and not to force the controls." Davis relayed the instructions to the pilot. Henry's calm, experienced voice was an anchor of reassurance amid the emergency. "Captain Harris, this is Henry from maintenance. Can you still feel some response in the controls with very gentle movements?" "Yes, Henry. Small movements still work." "Perfect. Then the backup is okay. Here's what we'll do. Reduce to 140 knots, long and smooth approach. Don't force anything. The aircraft will respond, just more slowly." The approach was tense, but Henry kept guiding the pilot, explaining each step with the patience of someone who had faced similar situations before. When the aircraft touched down safely, the entire tower erupted in applause. Captain Harris stepped out visibly shaken. "Where's Henry?" were his first words. "Right here, Captain." "Man, you saved my life. How did you know exactly what to do?" "Experience, Captain. 15 years working with these systems. You just needed someone who understood the technical specifics of the malfunction." Rebecca watched the scene with a smile on her face. This was exactly the kind of collaboration she and Richard had envisioned for the program. Colonel Stevens, who had followed the entire emergency, approached Rebecca. "You're on the right track. If Henry hadn't been here today, things could have turned out very differently." "That's what we hope for, Colonel, that everyone on the base feels their experience and knowledge are valued." And they are. In fact, I have some news for you. "What is it?" "High Command heard about the integration program you're developing. They want to expand the initiative to other bases in the region." Rebecca was surprised. "Really?" "Very much so. They want you and Commander Richard to present the project to a special committee next week." That night, Rebecca stayed in the hangar after hours, just watching the silent aircraft. Richard found her there. "What's on your mind, Rebecca?" "How strange life is, Commander. 3 months ago, I was just a janitor no one noticed. Today, I'm developing a program that could change how military bases operate." You were never just a janitor, Rebecca. You were always so much more than that. You just needed the right opportunity to show it. And if you hadn't made that cruel joke, maybe you'd never have found the courage to fly again. Perhaps, sometimes the bad things that happen to us are necessary to lead us where we need to be. They stood in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Rebecca, can I confess something? Of course. Before today, I was thinking about retiring. I thought I had nothing left to offer aviation. And now I feel like I'm truly starting to contribute, not just as a pilot, but as a person. And that's thanks to you. No, Commander, it's thanks to us. You gave me the chance to fly again, and I gave you the chance to rediscover yourself as an instructor and mentor. Maybe your father would be proud of how far we've come. I'm sure he would. He always believed aviation wasn't about the aircraft. It was about the people. People working together, respecting one another, growing together. The presentation to the High Committee took place the following week. Rebecca and Richard shared impressive data, reduced safety incidents, improved employee morale, and greater operational efficiency. But what impressed the committee most were the testimonies from the staff themselves. Henry from maintenance shared how he felt valued for the first time in years. A kitchen assistant spoke about how the meteorology workshops helped her better understand flight operations. A young soldier recounted how the program had sparked his interest in pursuing an aviation career. "In 3 months," said General Patterson, the committee's chair, "you've created something we've been trying to implement for years, a true culture of collaboration and mutual respect." "Thank you, General," Rebecca replied, "but the credit isn't ours. It belongs to everyone who believed things could be done differently. The program will be expanded to all bases in the South Central region," the General announced, "and you two will oversee this expansion as regional coordinators." After the meeting, Rebecca and Richard walked across the base, taking in the magnitude of what they'd achieved. "Do you realize what's happened here?" Richard said. "In just a few months, we went from a cruel joke to a nationwide program. It's amazing how something bad can turn into something so positive. Rebecca, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you feel like you've honored your father's memory?" Rebecca stopped and looked up at the sky, where an F-16 was performing training exercises. "You know, Commander, I spent 6 years thinking I'd honor my father only by flying like he did. But now I understand the best way to honor him is by doing what he did, teaching, inspiring, taking care of people. And you're doing that. We're doing that, and we'll keep doing it." 6 months later, the United Wings program was already running in 15 military bases. Rebecca had returned to flying regularly, but now she split her time between flights and coordinating the program. Richard, in turn, had become the mentor he was always meant to be. His former arrogance had given way to genuine humility and a sincere desire to help others grow. On a sunny morning, as they prepared another workshop, a young soldier approached. "Sorry to bother you, but can I ask something?" "Of course," Rebecca said. "Is it true you used to be a janitor before becoming the program coordinator?" "Yes, it's true." "And how did you manage to get here?" Rebecca smiled and glanced at Richard. "You know, sometimes in life, we need someone to challenge us, even if it's in a harsh way. And sometimes we need to find the courage within ourselves to accept that challenge. But most importantly," Richard added, "we have to be willing to look beyond appearances. Everyone has something valuable to offer, no matter their role." "Thank you," the soldier said. "Your story inspires me a lot." After she walked away, Rebecca reflected on the journey they'd taken. "Commander, do you think, if my father were here today, would he be proud?" "Rebecca, I'm sure he wouldn't just be proud. He'd recognize himself in everything you've done. You didn't just inherit his talent for flying, but also his gift for touching lives and inspiring people. And you? Do you recognize yourself in the person you've become?" Richard thought for a moment. "You know, I spent decades flying, racking up flight hours, medals, accolades. But only in these last few months have I felt like I've truly contributed to something bigger than myself. It's funny how life works. I needed to stop flying to discover there are other ways to fly." And you needed to stop being arrogant to realize there are other ways to be strong. Just then, an aircraft passed overhead, flying low toward the runway. They both paused to watch the perfect landing. "Do you still miss being up there?" Richard asked. "I always will. Flying is in my blood just like it was in my father's. But now I know I can honor that passion in many different ways. And I've learned that true leadership doesn't come from authority, but from respect. And respect is earned by treating everyone as equals, no matter their rank or role." They walked back to the hangar, where another day of work awaited them in the program that had changed not just their lives, but the culture of an entire military base. As they walked, Rebecca thought of all the people they'd impacted over those months. Employees who felt valued for the first time in years, young soldiers who discovered new passions, veteran pilots who learned to see beyond their own egos. "Commander, can I tell you something?" "Always." "Thank you for making that cruel joke that day," Richard laughed. "Why?" "Because without it, I might never have found the courage to fly again. And without flying again, I'd never have discovered that my real mission wasn't just to fly, but to help others find their own wings. And I'm grateful you accepted the challenge, even when it was just a spiteful jab." "Why?" "Because you taught me that true strength lies in humility, and that genuine respect is built by recognizing people's worth, not underestimating them." They arrived at the hangar, where a new group of employees awaited them for the afternoon workshop. Anxious, curious, hopeful faces, people from different roles, different ages, different backgrounds, but all united by the desire to learn and grow. Rebecca Johnson looked at those people and saw a little of herself in each of them. She saw untapped potential, dormant dreams, talents waiting to be discovered. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, greeting the group. "My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this is Commander Richard Thompson. Welcome to the United Wings program. Before we begin," Richard added, "we'd like you to know that you're here not just to learn, but also to teach. Each of you has unique experiences and knowledge that can contribute to everyone's success." Rebecca smiled as she saw the interest in their eyes. It was the same interest she had seen in her father's eyes when he taught young pilots, the same passion for sharing knowledge, for lifting others up, for building something greater than any one person. "Let's start with a simple question," she said. "Who here has ever felt underestimated because of the job they do?" Several hands went up. Rebecca knew that feeling all too well. "Well, do you see that aircraft over there?" She pointed to the F-16 she had flown months earlier. "6 months ago, I was just considered a janitor. Today, I'm the coordinator of a national program. And that didn't happen because I changed, but because people around me learned to look beyond appearances." The participants were impressed. Some recognized her as the janitor who had worked there before. "And I," Richard said, "learned that 40 years of flight experience didn't give me the right to disrespect anyone. I learned that true leadership comes from mutual respect and valuing people." Over the next 2 hours, they led an interactive session where each participant could share their experiences, skills, and aspirations. They discovered a maintenance assistant who was an expert in electronics, an office worker with a background in psychology, a driver who had been a defensive driving instructor. Every story revealed was proof that the program was on the right track. Extraordinary talents were hidden behind seemingly simple roles, just waiting for the chance to be recognized and put to use. At the end of the workshop, a woman around 60 years old approached Rebecca. "My name is Margaret. I've worked in the kitchen for 15 years, she said shyly. "Hi, Margaret, how can I help you?" "Well, I heard your story today and it gave me hope." "Hope for what?" "I studied nutrition a long time ago, but I never got to work in the field. I always had to take whatever job came along to support my family. And now? Now I think maybe I can contribute somehow. Maybe help improve the staff's meals, or give nutritional advice." Rebecca felt her heart warm. "Margaret, how about we talk about this next week? I'm sure your skills could be very useful here at the base." "Really? You're not just being polite." "Margaret, I was a janitor 6 months ago. If I've learned anything, it's that every person has value and every bit of knowledge can make a difference." Margaret walked away with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of joy and hope. Richard watched the scene and stepped closer to Rebecca. "Did you see what just happened?" "I did, and it reminded me why we do this. Every person who goes through this program leaves here a little different, more confident, more valued, more connected to her purpose. That's exactly what my father did with his student pilots. He didn't just teach them to fly, he helped people believe in themselves." As they organized the workshop materials, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived over the past few months. From an undervalued janitor to the national coordinator of a revolutionary program. From a woman burdened by past guilt to an inspiration for hundreds of people. "Commander, can I make a confession?" "Always. Sometimes I wake up thinking this is all a dream, that I'll go back to being just a janitor no one notices. And what do you do when you think that? I remember what you told me that first day, that respect isn't measured by the job we do, but by the value we bring to people's lives. And you've brought so much value, Rebecca, far more than you realize." They walked out of the hangar, watching the base's activity at the end of the day. Pilots returning from missions, mechanics finishing up maintenance, administrative staff wrapping up their shifts. Each person with their own role, but now all connected by a shared sense of purpose. "You know what makes me proudest about the program?" Rebecca said. "What?" "That we proved respect and appreciation cost nothing, but make all the difference. And that prejudices are just barriers we create ourselves." At that moment, they saw a group of employees from different departments chatting animatedly near an aircraft. Pilots, mechanics, janitors, administrative staff, all interacting as equals, sharing knowledge and experiences. "Look at that," Richard said, pointing to the group. 6 months ago, these people barely greeted each other. Everyone stayed in their own department with their own groups. And now they're a real team. Not just employees working in the same place, but people who respect and value each other. They were interrupted by a young soldier who came running up. "Ms. Rebecca, Commander Richard." "Hi, Tyler. What's going on?" "I just got a call from Andrews Air Force Base. They want to implement the United Wings program there too, and they asked you both to come give a presentation next week." Rebecca and Richard exchanged surprised glances. "Another base?" "Yes. And there's more. The commander there said he's already heard your story about how you went from janitor to program coordinator. He wants you to share it with all their staff." Rebecca felt a mix of pride and responsibility. "Tyler, you can confirm we'll be there. It'll be an honor." After the soldier left, Richard remarked, "Do you realize your story is inspiring people across the country?" "Our story, Commander. None of this would have been possible if we hadn't worked together." "True, but you have to admit it's extraordinary how something that started with a cruel joke turned into something so positive. Sometimes I think it happened exactly as it was meant to, as if it was all planned somehow." "Planned by who?" "Maybe by my father," she said, looking up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Maybe he found a way to keep being an instructor, even after he was gone." "You really believe that?" "I believe the people we love keep living through the lives we touch, and United Wings is touching so many lives." They fell silent for a few minutes, each lost in thought. The base's activity had slowed, and the calm of evening settled over the place. "Rebecca, can I ask one last thing?" "Of course." "If you could go back in time and change anything about that day, would you?" Rebecca thought carefully before answering. "You know, Commander, I'd change the way you made that joke. I'd turn it into a respectful invitation instead of a cruel taunt. Just that. Just that. Because everything else that happened was perfect, just the way it was. The pain, the growth, the discoveries, the transformations, all of it was necessary to bring us where we are now. And I'd change my arrogant attitude. I'd make it so I could have recognized your worth from day one, instead of having to learn through humiliation. But if you had, maybe I'd never have found the courage to accept the challenge. Sometimes we need extreme situations to discover our inner strength." They walked toward the cars, wrapping up another day in the program that had changed their lives. "Commander, thank you." "For what this time?" "For becoming the partner I didn't know I needed, for learning from me while teaching me, for helping me honor my father's memory in a way I never thought possible. Thank you, Rebecca, for teaching me that true strength comes from humility, for showing me respect is earned by lifting people up, not putting them down, for giving me the chance to become the mentor I should have always been. They said goodbye with a warm hug, as they did every day. It wasn't just a routine between co-workers, it was between two people who had transformed each other and in the process changed hundreds of other lives. Rebecca drove home thinking about the day she'd had, the people she'd met, the stories she'd heard. Every workshop, every conversation, every grateful smile confirmed she was on the right path. When she got home, she looked at a photo of her father on the living room table. In it, he stood with a group of young pilots, all smiling after a graduation ceremony. "Dad," she said softly, "I hope you're proud. I found a way to fly beyond aircraft. I found a way to touch lives like you did." That night, before bed, Rebecca reflected on everything since that life-changing day in the hangar. 6 months that hadn't just altered her life, but reshaped an entire military base. She thought of everyone who'd benefited from the program, staff who felt valued for the first time in years, young people who'd discovered new passions, veterans who'd learned new ways to contribute. Most of all, she thought of how she'd turned the pain of losing her father into strength to help others, honoring his memory not just by flying, but by teaching, inspiring, and lifting people up. The next morning, she woke with renewed purpose. There was still so much to do, new bases to visit, new programs to launch, new lives to touch. When she arrived at the hangar, Richard was already preparing materials for another workshop. "Morning, partner. Morning, Commander, ready for another day of changing lives?" "Always ready. You?" "I was born ready," she said, smiling. "I just had to figure that out." They worked side by side, setting up for another group eager to learn and grow. It was a routine they both cherished, their daily chance to make a difference. As they worked, Rebecca marveled at the extraordinary power of transformation in every person. How just one opportunity, one moment of recognition, could awaken hidden potential. "Commander, do you think we'll expand the program nationwide?" "I know we will. And you know why?" "Why?" "Because what we've built here isn't just a program. It's a change in mindset. And shifts in mindset spread naturally when people see the results. And the results are there for everyone to see. Exactly. Happier employees, a healthier work environment, greater operational efficiency. Everyone wins." At that moment, the first participants of the morning workshop arrived. New faces, but with the same expression of curiosity and hope that Rebecca had learned to recognize. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted. "Welcome to the United Wings program. Are you ready to discover that you all have wings to fly?" The chorus of positive responses filled the hangar with energy. It was the beginning of another transformative day, another opportunity to show people that they are worth far more than they imagine. As she began the presentation, Rebecca glanced briefly at the F-16 parked in the corner of the hangar. The aircraft that had been the catalyst for her transformation, the vehicle that had carried her not just into the sky, but into a new life. She smiled, knowing that on this day, just like every other since then, she would keep flying. Not just with aircraft, but with dreams, hopes, and human potential. And so, the janitor who became a pilot, and then the coordinator of a national program, continued her most important journey, helping others discover their own wings and the courage to use them. The end of the story. And now, dear listener, what did you think of this extraordinary story of perseverance and transformation? Were you moved by Rebecca and Commander Richard's journey? Share in the comments which part touched you the most, and if you've ever experienced a similar situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.